Hi, this is Jim Babjack from the Smithereens.
I'll do anything I have to do just to win the love of a girl like you.
And you're listening to the New Wave Music Podcast. So turn it up as loud as you want.
Welcome back to the fourth season of the New Wave Music Podcast. Steve, can you believe that we've been going now for 60 episodes?
T-Bone, I would not believe we've been able to do 60 successful episodes. And I can't believe how many countries this podcast is being listened to. And speaking of that, we want to give a shout out to our listeners in Sofia, Bulgaria.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, one thing that we wanted to reiterate, it's been a little while, is why we're doing this podcast. You know, Steve came up with the idea, and it's really because there's so much music from those core 80s and early 90s new wave artists that is still coming out, but is not getting any real radio airplay. So, you know, what better way to keep that alive than to talk about their new music?
And T-Bone, speaking of those artists that from the era that we like to highlight and focus on that you might not be familiar with, we've got one today, David Newton. He has a band called David Newton and the Mighty Angels. And you might be thinking to yourself, who is David Newton? Well, he was in a band called the Mighty Lemon Drops. You're no doubt going to remember their classic hit, Inside Out.
You can't stop my heart from turning inside out. Try to stop my world from turning inside out.
As well as such hits as All I Can Do.
I will try much harder for you. Rain or shine, it's all I can do.
And Out of Hand.
Think I lost my grip, it's out of my hands. Slipped between my fingers, out of my
Yeah, so this album is called A Gateway to Lifetime of Disappointment. Came out in 2020. And Steve, as you mentioned, he was with the Mighty Lemon Drops. He was the guitarist. Now, on this album, he pretty much does everything, the different instruments and the vocals and everything. Now, on those very, very rare moments where they do play live, they've done a little bit, but they're not really a road band. He does have friends and additional musicians come in, and then he anoints them the Mighty Angels.
Right, and he also has a couple guest vocals that have come in on this album. We'll try to talk through them as we get to those songs. One thing that struck me with this album is this is actually a 10-year in the making album for him. He actually released a 5-track EP back in 2011 called Paint the Town. And as you mentioned, the full album came out in 2020. And some of the questions that I've had as for show prep on this was, why was there a 10-year delay in getting the full album out? Why was it named A Gateway to a Lifetime of Disappointment? And why did it take so long for Dave Newton to release his first solo album after leaving the Mighty Lemon Drops? Well, for the answers to these questions and so much more, you're going to want to stay tuned to our interview with Mr. David Newton after our review. But before we get to the interview, let's jump into the album.
All right, so on the first track is called In Love and War. Now, Steve, this for me was a great opening with a strong beat, playful synths, and smart guitar work. The song builds and builds and never lets down. The chorus is outstanding and one that'll have you tapping your toes. The way the song seems to come to an end late in the track, but then revs right back up is a fantastic choice. I think that worked so well.
Yeah, this song opens with some strong percussions, a great guitar riff, and a melody that will have you humming along, and some outstanding vocals also from David Newton. This is not only a great track to open the album, but one that will pull you into the Mighty Angels and leave you wanting more.
Yeah, it kind of felt in a way, and maybe I'm just making stuff up here, but it kind of felt like a little celebration song, and that's why I liked it so much as an opening track on this album.
Well, let's move on to track number 2. The Kids Are Not All Right.
And one thing's for certain, it's that the kids are not alright. Can you believe it? Can you believe it? The kids are not alright. The kids are not alright. Can you believe it? Can you believe it? The kids are not alright.
I love the synth work that opened this track. Dave's vocals get to shine in this track as well. I love how his vocals were maybe a little bit more spoken word until he hits that chorus. In addition, I'm going to say that guitar riff that they used in the song was absolutely outstanding. Another highly enjoyable song.
Yeah, Steve, this is actually a play on the song The Kids Are All Right by The Who. And that title has also been used by numerous other artists, but The Who probably is one of the most famous. There's kind of a bongo sounding synth part of this track that I think is a wonderful backbone to the song. David has a way of creating a song that's both catchy, but also has some fascinating sounds that are both a little bit familiar and entirely unique.
And then we get to track number 3, The Songs That Changed Our Life.
Teenage streets, Brickfield nights, I want to see the bright lights tonight. These are the songs that changed our lives. My generation, your generation, I belong to the blank generation. These are the songs that changed our lives.
This one does feature guest vocalist Eddie Argos. But to me, what really shines is the topic of the song and the lyrics. I think it's safe to say that anybody who loves music has had those songs that have changed their life. I love how it's not just going through the albums and the tracks, but there's also a little reference to a personal experience in the song, such as you ask a girl to dance and she says no. Another fantastic song.
Yeah. Now, Eddie Argos, he's with a band called Art Brut. Personally, not really familiar with them, but after listening to Eddie Argos's vocals on this album, I'd really kind of like to look into them. Now, for me, Steve, this is probably the most unusual song on the album, yet I would say one that means the most. Guest singer Eddie uses spoken words to express those artists that meant so much to him. And if you get right down to it, really David, because he wrote the song, but they did agree on who these artists are and what it meant to them. It's short. This one's just over 2 minutes long. It's really a quick listen, and I liked it so much that I wanted it to just go on and on. I could have heard so much more of their influences that they have felt over the years. Thoroughly enjoyable song. I just wish it could have continued.
I so agree with you on that. Listening to some of those songs that changed their life was also songs that I found influential in mine. And
absolutely,
just hearing those songs, Tyler, just brings back those memories.
Oh, absolutely. So the fourth track is called Avoid It.
We should have never made that turn. I wonder if we'll ever, if we can avoid it. You should avoid it.
Fantastic lyrics, and musically, I just love the different tempos that change throughout the track. The pace slows midway through, then changes back to its original speed, and there's layers of guitars. They're not overwhelming, but they really make for a nice addition.
The music melody on this track was the highlight. The lyrics, the vocal delivery were also on point. I found myself really enjoying that use of the woohoo.
Oh, yeah.
Kind of reminded me a little bit of a XTC vibe. But T-Bone, so far, I'm really, no secret, I'm really enjoying this album.
Oh, 100%. Couldn't agree with you more. That takes us up to the fifth track, My First Band.
And we felt like new wave stars. We played a cover of TV stars. Was a gateway to a lifetime of disappointment. Bring the violins in the la 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 la. Oh la 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 la.
So this one has some jangly guitars that lead right into an amazing beat, and then followed by some fun synths. They all come together in just the right way. Now, the album title comes from this song, and despite the dour nature of that title, this is a bright, upbeat song.
And this one's another one of my favorite songs on the album. Dave's vocals are on point. The guitar, the percussions, the synth work, and the harmonica also just add to another layer of this song that I really enjoyed. The la 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 during the chorus I found to be very effective and catchy, but it also fit so well with the tone of the song. I love the lyrics on this song. I can just sum up the song by saying it's nothing but pure joy.
Yeah, it's funny because I was listening to this album again on the way here to do the recording, and I was hearing the same things that you're just talking about there. It's really quite startling how good it is. And so the next track is the 6th, Paint the Town. Now, Steve, if you don't hear an immediate connection to New Order on this track, then you've been hiding under a rock. I don't know if it's just a coincidence. I don't know if it was on purpose. I don't know if it was just a slight plagiarism, but I don't care. It sounded perfect for this track. It simply fits in so well in such a smart, lively song. Numerous tempo changes are in store again, and they all work.
The album so far has a great flow as each song seems to build upon the prior track. Paint the Town is no exception. I love the musical frenzy that swirls into this track. Yes, it did remind me of New Order a lot through this song, and I think that's just on the level of the musicianship from Dave.
Absolutely.
Like the prior songs before it, the vocals, the lyrics, and the musicianship were just outstanding.
Yeah, and it's not even really the whole song that I saw that connection. It was just kind of that initial guitar riff that has, it sounds like it's straight off of a New Order album. It didn't bother me, believe me. I would not even call it plagiarism by any stretch. I see it more as a tribute.
And that's going to take us to track number 7, Connect With You.
To connect with you, that's what you have to do. Go for a run, take the dive into our lives. It's true.
This one opens up with some synth and some acoustic guitars. I appreciate the vocal change that occurs during the song. This is one of the shortest songs on the album, but it's still up to the quality levels that we've heard from all the songs so far.
Yeah, you mentioned those synths. They are fun and animated, but they're not a sign of where the song is going. The beat is quick, and the guitars drive this song forward. This is another short song that I would have loved to hear it go further, exploring the different sounds and the uplifting lyrics about connections with others.
Moving on to track number 8, Bittersweet. This one features backing vocalist Sarah Nagari, and she does a great job keeping up with Dave on this track. This is another solid song tucked into towards the end of the album, and like most of these songs on this album, it's just not getting the attention that it deserves. It's just a great, fun, joyful song.
Absolutely. Yeah, it has great musicianship and very buoyant guitars and fantastic drumming. They're really only the start of this track. Dave's vocals are straightforward and powerful, but yeah, I absolutely agree with you about Sarah. The backing vocals during the chorus really help to elevate this track to a new level. And so that takes us up to the 9th track, This Time.
This time is greater than the others. Feels right the moment to discover. This light is shining like no other. It's so much brighter than the others. There doesn't have to be a reason. Could be the timing of the season. This time it's just greater than the others.
Steve, I love that clapping that opens the track. It's a nice touch, and having it stop, then come back is really smart. Again, a very short song, and you know, this is the shortest one on the album. It's only 1 minute and 30 seconds. I found myself getting sucked in, and then it was over. It's really too quick, in my opinion.
I was wondering when this was going to happen, but our notes are almost identical on this one. I really enjoyed for you get that from that slightly slower tempo to that clapping beat that moves this song along. The acoustic guitar that kicks off this track was another nice sound or surprise, but another short song that's going to leave you wanting more and more. That takes us to the end of the album, track number 10, Everything Is Just So.
There's a light to the horizon, many times I go. It is so, it is
As I've said throughout this review, another solid song. I love the music melody that is throughout this track, but when that chorus kicks in, again, nothing but pure joy for me. What a solid way to end the album.
Yeah, we see that quite often. There's times that we don't, and this is one of those that really ends wonderfully. This is a punchy song that has some fantastic bass and really engaging guitars. The hey, hey chorus really adds to the overall effect. Steve, I can only imagine seeing this band live, although it's probably unlikely, and the crowd joining in on this song. It's a wonderful way to end this short album.
T-Bone, first off, I want to thank our listener, Monica, for recommending that we check out Dave Newton and the Mighty Angels. And as you can tell from our review, I loved every minute of this album. I would highly recommend this album if you're looking for new music, the one that you can just easily listen to from start to finish. I think we said joy, but some of the words around here is pure joy, fun, exciting album. From start to finish, it's just pure joy.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've mentioned this, but needless to say, it's a very quick listen. Most of the songs are very short. I'm not necessarily sure that that's a good thing. I truly wanted them to go on quite a bit longer, but it's hard to complain when you've had such an enjoyable experience. I was a huge fan of the Mighty Lemon Drops, listened to them constantly in the 80s and early 90s. What I like so much about this album is that Dave, in no way whatsoever, is trying to rehash those days. This album is fresh, exciting, and one that can be listened to repeatedly. So just as with you, Steve, I obviously highly recommend this album. The musicianship is strong. David's vocals are perfectly matched, and the sound of the songs are instantly memorable. And so on that point, I'd like to turn things over to Steve.
At this time, T-Bone, I'm thrilled that we have a special guest joining us on the New Wave Music Podcast. We are today joined by Dave Newton from the Mighty Lemon Drops and his new band, The Mighty Angels. Dave, thank you so much for joining us today.
Cheers. Thank you for having me.
Dave, let's start off way back in time. How did, kind of a probably simple question for you, but it always made me wonder, how did you guys come up with the band name, The Mighty Lemon Drops?
That was actually Tony, Tony, the bass player, co-songwriter in the band. He had the name before the band existed. We'd all known each other for quite a while. I went to high school, secondary school, with Paul Marsh, the singer. And we'd met Tony, bass player, and Keith Rowley, the drummer, at a club we used to go to, JB's in Dudley. And we'd actually played, me, Paul, and Tony. We had a band when we were teenagers called Active Restraint. And we put out a 7-inch and stuff. And then, that kind of ended in 1983 or something. And in the meantime, I don't know, Tony was messing about with doing something. I think he was playing with Keith even, and that they had that name, the Mighty Lemon Drops. And when we all hooked up again it was early 1985, and both myself and Paul from the Lemon Drops were both unemployed at the time. We just knocking about together, and we had the idea of getting a band together again, and we needed a name. And Tone said, "What about the Mighty Lemon Drops?" And I was like, "Wow, that's a decent name. That's a good name." And it was all Tony's fault.
And how did the band come together?
Like I said, we all knew each other, and we were all into the same kind of music. We were all around the same age. I was actually the youngest, but within a year or two of each other. And we grew up with going to gigs, and it was, in the UK, it was basically punk and then post-punk, the bands that came afterwards. And, that was, because I was born in 1964. So, by the time I was like 18, 19, 20, that was when, a lot of the post-punk bands, whether it was like, Gang of Four and, Popcorn Echo and the Bunnymen, Teardrop Explodes, all that. And that was, we'd all go to those kind of gigs together. So we just knew each other, and we all kind of played instruments. And there was a great club near where we lived in Dudley called JB's. It's quite well known. It's no longer, but it was kind of on the circuit. It was like it was like 280 capacity, I think. And pretty much all the up and coming touring national bands would go through there, in the And we saw, I mean, everyone from, a lot of the bands that I mentioned played there, like, Teardrops, Bunnymen, and, even later, bands like up in late 80s, early 90s, bands like Blur played their first early gigs there and stuff. And, that's how Paul and I met Keith and Tony, was through that place.
About how old were you when you started working on the Mighty Lemon Drops?
I would have been 20 years old, 19, 20.
A young lad.
Funny because, we were young because the band before we were in, Paul, Tony, and myself, Active Restraint, I would have been 18, I guess. And then after that, I was in another band in between called The Wild Flowers, who actually, because we did one album and a couple of singles, and then after I left, they actually got they got signed in the US by Slash Records, which was a cool label at the time, and put out a lot of great bands, Violent Femmes and lots of stuff. And but they continued. So we felt like we were only like, I was 20 years old, but it felt like we'd kind of been around the block by the time the Lemon Drops got together. But none of us were trained musicians or anything like that. It was the punk rock spirit, really, we carrying on.
So in the US, the band had a strong cult following, especially on the college charts with, titles like Inside Out and All I Can Do. Did you guys pay attention to those charts, or was your focus more in the UK?
Well, it was funny because we never even thought about America when we formed the band. It was just playing locally and doing stuff. And so we never focused on either, really. It was more, we just, we never in a million years thought when we formed the band that it was a career path. It's not like today where you can go to these schools and they'll teach you how to be in a band or whatever they do. And, we were just unemployed and we were into music and we could just about play our instruments. So we never thought about anything like that. But it was funny when we started, we got signed by Sire Records in the US. And because we were on a different label in the UK, we were on Chrysalis Records, Blue Guitar, via Jeff Travis from Rough Trade had a label called Blue Guitar through Chrysalis. So we were actually on two different labels. So it was quite surprising when we first came to the US in early 1987. We were on tour with the band The Chameleons, a UK band.
Uh-huh.
We actually loved The Chameleons as well, which was like a dream. First time around the US. I was like 21, 22 maybe at the time. And things started to take off there, and there was none more surprised than us, really. So it was great.
You just mentioned being in the US. So did you guys do much touring in the States?
We did, yeah. We came pretty much every year from, we first came in 87 with the Chameleons. We came back in 88 we toured with Love and Rockets at first. Then we did a handful of dates with the Church. And then a band called the Rave Ups. The rest of that tour were great. Then in 1990, we came here with Ocean Blue and John Wesley Harding opening.
Oh, wow.
And then we came back in 91 with a band called Sister Double Happiness. And then we did our final tour in 92 with Material Issue and Too Much Joy.
Huh.
Which was that was a fun tour, and that was kind of our last tour. We kind of knew, we had a feeling we were going to be, we'd been going for like 8 years, and which when you're younger, 8 years is a long time. Like now, it doesn't. When you get a little older, it seems like nothing. But we were still in our late 20s at that point, and we just felt like it had run its course. We'd made 5 albums during that period, so that was the end of 92, beginning of 93. We called it a day. We already got day jobs.
So, Dave, if we can switch gears a little bit and speak about your new band, The Mighty Angels.
Yep.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but you didn't release any material that featured you on lead vocals until the 2011 EP, Paint the Town. Is that correct?
That is indeed correct, yeah. I'd always done like backing vocals and stuff. And, in the meantime, like after... Because I moved from the UK to the US in 1995, and I didn't really know what to do because I wasn't, after the Lemon Drops, I played with a UK band called Blue Aeroplanes for a little while. And then I moved here and I started a recording studio because we moved to Burbank and we had a 2-car garage sitting out back. And I didn't really know what I was going to do, getting a proper job or anything. So I started putting the recording studio together. I started buying a lot of just collecting recording equipment and stuff. And then I started producing and recording bands. It was just by accident. I recorded a friend's band and it turned out fairly, they were happy with it and they told somebody else. And before I knew it, that's what I was doing. So I spent, a decade and a half just recording and producing bands. And it never occurred to me really to do my own thing, and I think in 2010 it was that I've always been kind of writing songs. I'd written songs, collaborated with a few other bands, and I had a handful of songs, and I started recording them in spare time in my studio. And that's when I had a bash at singing them because I couldn't be bothered to find anybody else. And that's when, the first tracks that made up the Paint the Town EP come together. So it was kind of organic. It wasn't planned. I didn't have a master plan or anything. I just ended up, when I'd got 5 songs, I was like, oh, maybe I should put them out.
Well, I really like the new band. And as T-Bone mentioned earlier about the name behind the name of the Mighty Lemon Drops, I'm actually curious what led to the name or the creation of David Newton and the Mighty Angels.
I don't know. I kind of wanted something that could never call it the Mighty Lemon Drops because it was just me. And but I kind of wanted something that would sound somewhat familiar. And I don't know. There was no big master plan. It just kind of came to me. And I like the idea of because a lot of bands like in the 60s, there was bands like the Midnighters, who were a large band that I was a big fan of. And I like the idea of the rather than the. And,
I like that too.
So I wanted something that was kind of familiar, but wasn't, totally using the name of Mighty Lemon Drops, obviously, because it was just me as opposed to the rest of the guys.
So the EP Paint the Town was the first material that you released. Yep. And then it looks like you went back and added on to, or that's included as part of the new album, where I think you went back and added 5 new songs to the new album. What led up to finally finishing up that album?
It was during the pandemic when, like everybody else, I was at home. My studio is actually out back. It's behind the house in what used to be a 2-car garage. Our cars have been on the street for a couple of decades now. And I just realised I had a few dozen unfinished ideas and songs, and I just started putting them together. And, I played most of the instruments. Then I got a few friends to help out as well, playing on a few of them. And a lot of people didn't realise that I'd made the Paint the Town EP, so I kind of put those songs together with 5 or 6 new ones and made the full album. So it was pretty much, not inspired by the pandemic, but that was what got me motivated to do something. It was during that period.
Well, you just mentioned that you played most of the instruments. Is there actually the Mighty Angels? Are they a group of people, or is that just kind of a band name?
Right. It's a band name, but we have done a couple of shows. We did one, actually, funnily enough, opening for Pete Murphy. There's a place nearby where we live, it's quite well known now. It's about 2 hours away, called Pappy and Harriet's out in the desert in Pioneer Town, near the Joshua Tree area. And we go out there a lot, and we know the owners. And Pete Murphy was playing, and they had the idea of me kind of putting together a band. So I had a bunch of my friends kind of became that band, and we did that show. I did a couple of others as well. Who else did we open for? We did some with local bands, and we did one with Mike Watt from the Minutemen, which I know is a kind of a strange combo. So there kind of is, there's not really a band, but I have friends from a lot of the bands that I've worked with over the years who'll kind of help me out playing live, Because I put another thing out as well, which, I mean, we may get to later, but I put another single out after I did the album as well, Winter Tragedy, which came out last year or the year before. God, time moves so quickly now. And again, I had a bunch of my friends. We made a video for that and from different bands.
So with it not really being so much a band, if you do some touring, you could really just you could have anybody come in and be on stage with you, and they become
much, yeah.
the Mighty Angels.
Yeah, but it's nice to have friends and people who So it's who kind of want to do it. And it's just for a bit of fun and just to go and play and hang out, But there's no real plans to tour or anything, or I mean, if something was offered, I would consider it, but it's just a casual kind of thing, really.
Nice.
There's no big kind of master plan and all that.
All right. The album title comes from the song "My First Band." I love the album title, but I hopefully you have not had a lifetime of disappointments.
That's just me being the way that it's kind of. I think it's a British kind of thing, and it's funny because I've lived in Los Angeles for so long. Because and you're surrounded by people who they appear to be overly confident and. People who want to be actors or musicians and all that, and you'll kind of hear them kind of, blabbering on at Starbucks or wherever and all that. And I just thought, I don't really, really think like that, but I just thought it's kind of funny, and people do pick up on that because I think that, when they hear, me talking about putting my first band together when I was a teenager, and I think the line's going to be, it was a gateway to a lifetime of greatness or something. And I just like the fact that it says disappointment instead. Because, I mean, I shouldn't really, I'm not complaining, but cause it's not really been disappointing, but I just kind of like, that's the kind of British way of like not looking at things.
Well, it's a great album title. I loved it. It's perfect. The songs that changed my life. Now, you used guest vocalist Eddie Argost from the band Art Brut. How did he become involved in that song?
I've known each other for a long time. Since it's really funny because I was a big fan of Art Brut from they formed a band. Their first single that came out. God, that's near coming on for 20 years ago now. That's how long they've been going. I think 2005 came out, so 18 years. I'm aging them before their time. It's funny, I was a fan of the band then Eddie started dating a friend of mine from LA, Diane Valdez, who was in a band that I worked with, produced, called The Blood Arm. And this was around 2007. 2008. So, and it was crazy because I got to know him through Diane and we became friends and we'd hang out and drink beer and blah, blah, blah. Then, so we've known each other for quite a long time, really. And then when I had the backing track for this song and I thought of combining a list of like all of my favorite songs from over the, decades and all that. And, then I was like, I wonder if I could get somebody else to do the vocal on it. So I asked Eddie, and he said, wow. And then I sent him the lyrics and the list of songs, and he's like, and I said, if you want to change any of the songs, or if you, and he like looked at it and he said, you know what? He said, I wouldn't change a thing. He said, they're like all of my kind of favorite songs too. So he did it, and that was, that was great.
Yeah, I really like his kind of spoken word style of singing that. It really works well with the song itself.
Yeah, he's great. I mean, he's brilliant. He actually recorded, because he lives in Berlin now, and this was during pandemic. So I sent him the backing track and he recorded the vocal with the guy who lived upstairs from him. He was he's in the band Brian Jonestown Massacre. And he has a little studio, and he recorded the vocals there, and then it was all done via. He sent me the file back, and it just fit right in. So it was great. It was brilliant. Yay!
That song, the songs that changed my life, I think that's one that everyone can relate to, as we've all had songs that have changed our life. Totally. Can you elaborate on some songs that maybe have shaped your life?
I mean, ones that are listed in that song from this is from memory now because I should have written them all down really. From like, you know, growing up in the UK, it was great because it's the one thing that was a bit weird for me when I moved to the US was that you don't get multi-formatted like that. You get like rock stations and you get like top 40 stations, and you get soul stations, and you get, you don't really like in the UK, like much maligned is like BBC, you know, Radio 1 and Radio 2, but it was multi-formatted and they would play all types of music, and it wasn't unusual to hear on the radio. You'd hear like, you know, rock and roll next to like, you know, I grew up in the 70s, so it was, you know, everything from like glam rock and glitter rock to like soul to reggae. Like reggae was in the charts in the top 40. So we grew up with all of it. It was all around all of it, really. So that's why, you know, it starts off with Bob and Marcy, Ungifted and Black, the Jackson 5, Want You Back. And then for me, when I was a teenager, it was the early kind of, you know, punk and kind of post-punk thing that changed my kind of, that's what I was listening to, you know. So you got everyone from the Mekons and, you know, all of that kind of stuff, you know. Yeah.
Now, I mentioned the song My First Band earlier, and I think you may have already kind of alluded to this. Is that song about the Lemon Drops or something entirely earlier? And tell us more about that song.
It was earlier. It was when I was in secondary school. I was like, I mean, I couldn't really like play an instrument, but me and a bunch of my friends put a band together, and we originally called the Lowest Class. Then we changed it, which was a kind of a high school reference, I guess. Then we changed our name to the Urban Kids, and we played a gig at our high school. And that's pretty much it. I'm not really that much into storytelling songs, but that one is kind of a storytelling song. So it is. It's you know, it's about our band playing our first gig in front of, you know, friends from school, our teachers from school. Came to the show as well, which was, it was crazy, really. But that is pretty much what that song's about.
The album Gateway to a Lifetime of Disappointment is an album that I would just call nothing short of pure joy.
Thank you.
It really reminds me of maybe some of the artists in the style of Paul Heaton and the Lightning Seeds. It's one that I thoroughly enjoyed. Me and T-Bone cannot recommend it enough to anybody who wants to hear a fantastic album. Do you have any songs in particular on the album that stood out to you or that you'd recommend our audience to jump into?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, the Lightning Seeds comparison is flattering. Thank you very much for that. I love Ian Brody and all of his stuff and what he's done and all that. I mean, you can hear those influences in the album. I'm not ashamed of that. No, I don't shy away from that. I'll admit, you know, there's lots of stuff on there that you can say, oh, that sounds a bit like blah, blah. But, I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's tough to say. The one thing that I did with the album, which I'm a little... is the song I put at the end is Everything Is Just So. That's kind of one of my favourite songs that I've written, and I'm proud of that. And because when I put the EP out, it was actually the third track, and it got a little more attention than when I did the album. I put it as track 10, like right at the end, and a lot of people said, "Why did you put that at the end? That's the best track on the album." And it's like, I don't know, but it is one of my that's one of my personal favourites. But I mean, you know, I like them all for different reasons, you know.
No, I think it's always a good idea. And Steve and I talk about this regularly about having a good closing song, something that's strong and closes out the album, kind of like an exclamation point to the sentence.
Yeah, that was kind of my idea when I did the track listing and put them together. But I wasn't thinking at the time that, you know, that they may get, you know, because I mean, it's great, but it's also kind of not so great when there's so much music and there's only so much time. And I spend a lot of time listening to a lot of music, and to get through a 10-song album and then get through another 10-song album, a new album, it's like, not everybody does that, and I mean, I'm guilty. I'll listen to if it's an artist that I don't know, and I'll listen to the first 3 tracks. If I like it, I'll listen further, but if I'm not totally taken by that, there's a good chance that I may not listen to the whole thing. And I think it's unfortunate, but it's the way that it is, there's only so much time.
Well, as we've already said in our review, that we think everybody should listen to track 1 through 10. It's definitely worth it.
Good work. You're doing good work.
So, Dave, you mentioned that you released the single Winter Tragedy back in December of 2021.
Oh, well, yes. Yeah, you reminded me, because I couldn't remember when I put it out, but it was, yeah, you're right.
So are there any plans for a follow-up album or another EP in the future?
I probably will do something. I have a few unfinished tracks. There's actually one that I started working on, and then because the closest thing I have to resembling a day job is I have my studio and I work with other bands and record other artists on that. And, at the moment I'm actually working on, again, the band Too Much Joy, who the Mighty Lemon Drops toured with back in 1992. That was our last tour. And, that was, God, what's that? That's 31 years ago. It is a long time, but I kind of stayed in touch, stayed kind of friends. And, they came in, Tim and Jay from the band came in a couple of years ago. And then last month, the two of them came back in the studio again, in my studio. And it just happened Tommy, the drummer, who lives back east, was going to be in Los Angeles. So the 3 of them came in and they did 5 songs on what was going to be, wasn't sure if it was going to be a side project. And, but they, pretty happy with what came out. So there's a chance that it's going to be, there's talk of them coming back and doing some more stuff. So it may even be a full-length Too Much Joy album. I don't know for sure, or whether it, could be. But that's what I've mixed 3 tracks. And I'm in the middle of mixing 2 more, and so that's actually what I'm working on at the moment. So it's good.
Do you and the Mighty Angels, do you hit the road at all, or is it kind of just a fun project that you do as a side thing?
It's that at the moment. I mean, like I said, you never say never, but there are no plans to do anything at the moment. But if and everybody else, because my band is all people who are either in other bands or they've got, we've all got day jobs and stuff, so. It's just a project, really, but you never know. There's, never say never.
Did you say earlier though that you have played live with the Mighty Angels?
Yeah, like I said, we did the show with Pete Murphy. We did the show with we did one with Mike Watt. We did one with a band called the Henry Clay People. I also played with. There's a band that I produced who did quite well called the Little Ones. And we did a show with them. We opened for them. So we've done a handful. But again, it's more things when, if we get asked to do something, it's like, that'd be fun, to put it together, and I get my friends to help me out.
And how were the songs off the album, the new album, how were they received by an audience?
Oh, good. We didn't get anything thrown at us or anything like that. So... kind of it was good. I threw a couple of Mighty Lemon Drops songs in there as well.
I was just going to ask you that. Yeah,
crowd pleasers as well. Nice. But this is a side thing. It's different. It's not the Mighty Lemon Drops. That's something else. This is, but it's like they were. I played the songs that because I was the co-songwriter of a lot of the songs, so they are my songs. So I would. Good. I would play them, but it's not. I'm not trying to be or take anything away from the Mighty Lemon Drops. Right. It's me playing, kind of like covering my own songs.
So, Dave, I got one other final question. You mentioned, it's an entirely different band than the Mighty Lemon Drops, and we think it sounds fantastic.
Brilliant. However,
I couldn't help notice the album layout for A Gateway to a Lifetime of Disappointment recalls the look of the Mighty Lemon Drops album Laughter. Was that like a little Easter egg intentional, or was it just coincidence?
I just like the look of the album. I like the art on the album. I thought it looked great. And I did kind of like, again, want to make it look somewhat familiar, but not like, kind of, because it's not the Mighty Lemon Drops. It's my own thing. But I did, I thought the art for that was good. I mean, the art of all of our album. The only album that I'm not crazy about the art on is that we had an album called Sound, the Mighty Lemon Drops, and that was we had a good idea, but I don't think it was executed that well. But I think all the other records, we'd have a bit of input, but they were done by Mighty Lemon Drops records. I'm talking about done by other people.
Nice.
But
Nice.
yeah.
Well, Dave, we can't thank you enough for joining us on the podcast today. It's been a good talk, fun to listen to you talk about the history and the new band. Where can our listeners find you? Either social media, or where can they get your album? What's the best place to keep in touch with you guys?
Yeah, well, the one thing I should mention before we go is that the Mighty Lemon Drops had a box set come out at the end of last year, five CDs. It's the first 3 albums, lots of extra stuff, loads of other stuff. It came out on Cherry Red Records back in November. So if anyone's a fan and they want to get pretty much everything we did from the first 3 albums, all the early stuff, loads of radio sessions, live stuff. That's something new. Sorry, what was the question again?
Oh, yeah. Where can our listeners get more about you and the Mighty Angels? Whether it be a website or your social media or Bandcamp or whatever that you might be.
If you Google like David Newton, the Mighty Angels, I have a page and a Facebook group, Facebook page and everything. As do the Lemon Drops as well. So feel free to come and or check it out. And a lot of my stuff's on the usual platforms as well. You can find it on YouTube, of course, and iTunes, etc.
Fantastic.
Same with Lemon Drops, stuff's all on there too. It's all pretty much, findable nowadays.
Fantastic, fan. Great. Well, again, we appreciate it. Steve, do you have anything left?
Thank you.
Thanks again for your time. This has been a great interview. I've been looking forward to it. I really love the album, A Gateway to a Lifetime of Disappointment.
Thank you.
As well as been with the Mighty Lemon Drops, but I think this is a whole new level, and really would encourage any listeners to go out there. And if you want to hear a good album, this is one of them.
Ooh, thank you. I appreciate it. That's very nice of you. Thank you. All right, well, cheers.
Again, we'd like to thank David Newton for joining us on the New Wave Music Podcast. And of course, we'd also like to thank all our listeners that support and listen to us. We really appreciate you guys. Our next episode, T-Bone, we actually have another interview.
Yes, we do.
We're going to be interviewing Josie Cotton.
Yes, that should be very interesting. She has a brand new album out, and it'll be fun to talk to her, I think. Now, of course, you can find us on all the different social medias, whether that's Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, sort of. We also have our website, newwavemusicpodcast.com.
And like this episode was suggested by our listeners, and we really loved it. If you guys have a suggestion for a future episode, please let us know.
Yeah, you can do that at newwavemusicpodcast@yahoo.com. And another thing, Steve, that I would like to bring up to our listeners just to close things off here is that we're kind of in the concert season right now. Part of our website does have photos from concerts that you've gone to. We'd love to have you email us photos from your concerts you've attended. We'll put them up on the website and attribute them to you. Thanks again for listening. We'll see you on the next episode.